Martin. Let's stay with this discussion. And Kenya has pledged $1 million for this African court, of course a replacement, quote-unquote, of the International Criminal Court. In studio, I'm joined by Samuel Chepkonga. He's the chair of Justice and Legal Affairs Committee in the National Assembly. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And I am joined by Martin Olo, political analyst. Thank you so much for joining us.
Welcome.
Mr. Chepkonga, I'll begin with you. Is the African Union interested in getting justice, or is this because the ICC has targeted a sitting head of state?
First and foremost, this is not a reaction to the ICC. This process commenced in 1998 with the adoption of the ogutu Protocol. Under Protocol 1.
Speak up a little bit.
Under Article 1 of that protocol, it stated very clearly that an African Court of Human and People's Rights was going to be created. At that point, it had not been given powers to prosecute criminal activities. But later on, under the Malabo Protocol, this the mandate of the court was expanded to include criminal activities. What the African Union is seeking to do is to include criminal cases to be prosecuted by this court. The reason why the African countries are very uncomfortable with the ICC is because of the reasons that other countries have given. It is bound to be manipulated politically by those member states that are powerful in the ICC. And this has been the problem that, that has prevented the United States of America from joining the ICC or signing the Rome Treaty. If I bring this into context, when the Senate ICC, the Congress of the United States Senate Committee on ICC, when it was reviewed as to whether it should sign and ratify the Rome Statute, the former Senator Rod Krams stated very clearly that this treaty is very bad for America. And he said that this treaty must be opposed. It is not in the interest of America. And China has equally said the same thing. India has equally said the same thing. And Africans have said the same thing.
Okay.
We are not seeking to run away from international justice. What we want is fair justice that is not partial.
Martin, this is not a very good quote. What do you think?
You know, what my friend Sam amuses me about is that he says that the international community, the court is open to manipulation. So is the African court open to manipulation. Because if they are thinking that world leaders will manipulate ICC, so African leaders are also preparing to manipulate the African court.
So basically they're looking for a system they can manipulate.
Absolutely. And then, you see, to argue about America and to argue about China, and then go ahead and want to establish a court in Africa is missing the point. If ICC is not good, then the African court is also not good. So you can't have it on one end and not on the other. In any case, African leaders have told us in no uncertain terms that they want immunity. Mr. Chepkonga here is one of those people who are pushing to give immunity to both the president and the deputy. So, and African leaders also want immunity. So if they want immunity for their presidents, they want immunity for their deputy presidents, for whom are they preparing the African court? For their opposition, for their opponents.
Okay.
Linda, let me just put this into perspective.
Okay.
You know, the former Prime Minister of United Kingdom stated this very clearly while trying to persuade the British. And he said this, Robin Cook himself. He said, the ICC is not being created for the Prime Ministers of UK and the Presidents of the United States of America. I mean, if ICC is not created for the UK Prime Minister, why would we create a court for Kenyan President?
So then what you're saying, the African one is being created for opposition.
I mean, Martin, you know you are my very good friend.
Yeah.
You know, nobody is trying to run away from injustice. We are saying any crime that attracts genocide, that can go to the level of international crimes, that should be able to attract international sanctions. But not any crime that is of violence nature. You know, conflicts, you know, if you look at what ICC has just done, it is investigating violences. For instance, in the Kenyan case, it has decided to investigate political and election violence.
All right.
These are not international crimes. These are not genocide.
Mr. Chepkonga, let me see if I can rephrase this.
Yes.
The African Union is trying to come up with an African court that will be fully funded and managed by Africa. Okay. Some of the judges there will most likely be nominated by sitting heads of state.
Yeah.
How practical is it then that you can have sitting heads of state, African leaders prosecuted in this particular court? That is the concern.
Let me tell you, Linda, it is even terrible and worse for the ICC. The ICC is funded exclusively 60% by the EU countries. The EU countries are funding the ICC 60%. And someone has said that there is a relationship between funding levels and control and influence of any institution. We know that this court, we are told that the states that form the ICC are equal. We cannot be equal. How can we be equal with our former colonial masters? For instance, the UK, the French, the Portuguese, the Spanish.
Okay.
I mean, that is not possible.
Martin?
These are people who are exercising political influence over the court itself.
You know
There
what
is no-
my good friend Chepkwanga is saying, that they are also looking for a court they can control, where they can fund and also influence. Now, if that corollary is true, then we don't need an African court, because it's as bad as the ICC court. And that also means that we are wasting our resources. Even the $1 million that we've committed to it, who could as well do better things with it in Kenya.
What are the options from where you sit?
From where I sit, Kenya has has promulgated a constitution which says that any international treaty that we are parties to is part of our law. So the beginning point is to change that part of the constitution and then say, no, we are not going to do this, we will only do the things we want. So first we have agreed that any international treaty we are signatories to is part of our law. And then we have also said that as a people, we abhor genocide, we abhor international crime, so we want to be law-abiding. So for that reason, we shouldn't be fighting a court just because we may be the candidates today. Tomorrow, it will be somebody else. And indeed, what we've seen from an African perspective is that we have been unable to even subscribe to AU. So AU is starved of resources. Now you're telling me to establish a court and you will fund it. They will not be able to fund it. And so we are simply in a game of musical chairs.
You know, Linda, Martin loses the point that this court was not established as a reaction to ICC. This process commenced as far back as 1988.
Indeed, but you realize the push really was the minute
it's just that it has been accelerated because of the injustice that has been visited upon the Africans themselves.
Okay.
Because if you look at the ICC itself, it is exclusively prosecuting Africans.
But
What nobody has told us. Let me tell you, Linda. Nobody has told us why Ocampo terminated investigations that they were undertaking in Iraq, where over 200,000 people have been killed. Now, you know, you are investigating some violence that occurred in a stadium in Guinea, in which about 57 to 150 people died. And you are calling that one genocide. I mean, it has not reached it is the crimes that were committed there were against a certain laws in that country. But they are not of international nature as to attract international community sanctions.
Linda,
and so what I'm saying is this. You know,
Martin, hold on,
Martin is trying to dismiss this matter as if, you know, he's my very good friend. We have been in school together. It's unfortunate that he holds weird ideas like this when he does. Instead of supporting a court that is run by Africans. And we are saying nobody is trying to run away from injustice. What we are saying is that if you commit any crimes of the nature that attracts international sanctions, you must be taken before an African court.
But the concern is, this is an African court. The judges are appointed by the leaders. How practical is it? That is the underlying issue.
Let me explain this. Let me contextualize this. Let me contextualize this. I don't want Martin to monopolize this process.
But you do realize he also
now,
has
let me explain to you, Linda. We have courts in Kenya. As you know, I'm the chair of Justice and Legal Affairs Committee in Parliament. We have courts in Kenya. They are staffed by Kenyans. We appear before these courts. Nobody has said that if Chepkwanga appears in that court, that any judge is going to be compromised. Why is it that our own judges, we don't claim, because Martin has appeared in that court and a lawyer is presiding over it, that that lawyer will be compromised?
But you do realize there's some position.
No, there's nothing like that. Justice must be dispensed in accordance with the law.
Okay,
Linda, we're losing this issue.
Okay.
I want us to go on record that this court is not as demonized. I mean, it's not the way it's demonized. Our president has been before this court. This court has found that there is actually no enough evidence to prosecute him. So it's actually been let off the hook. So it's possible that even the deputy president will come out of this thing. It's possible. So instead of blaming the court and finding ways to demonize it, let us actually believe that it's administering justice. And so that if the president today was released and the deputy is released tomorrow, everybody realizes that this court actually followed some rule of law. But now to say that we need an African court, as if to suggest an African court will have more justice than any other court, is a misnomer that I want my friend to disabuse. Because when we say that there's nothing specific and there's nothing particular, and you see, he's saying that this court is not a reaction. The Cabinet Secretary for Foreign Affairs says that the ICC expedited it. Now he's saying that this court is foreign, and Museveni says he has no faith in this court. The other day, Museveni allows Ongwen to go. Now, Museveni says he'll sponsor a bill on the motion in AU. He doesn't. He hasn't signed it. So what are we hearing? Mixed messages. And these are things that we should be able to...
Is there a flip-flop of some sort from African nations?
Let me tell you, Linda, Martin misses the point. The African...
Both of you are accusing each other of missing the point.
All the time you miss the point, and you've been a good colleague of mine. The African court is not being established for escapists. It is being established for purposes of processing justice within the African continent. We need to contextualize the events that have taken place in Africa. Let me tell you, if ICC was there during the time of liberation of South Africa, even matters of self-determination would have been criminalized as international genocide. In fact, Nelson Mandela today would be languishing in an ICC jail. Thanks for the fact that ICC was not in existence at that time. It has, in fact, I like what Professor Mohamed Mamdani, the Ugandan professor who is teaching law in Columbia University, he has said ICC is a Western-driven institution and that it is not good for Africans. This is an all-eminent professor. No one has been able to challenge him.
My friend hasn't, or is refusing to understand there's something like international humanitarian law. There is a way in which just war is waged, and there's a threshold beyond which you go, and it's no longer just war. So he knows that whether you're in a guerrilla warfare, you cannot target civilians. Whether you're in a guerrilla warfare, you cannot use children. Whether you're in a guerrilla warfare, you cannot commit mass rape and mass murder. So you know that. So if you're going to commit crimes, it doesn't matter what your cause is, however genuine, however bona fide it is. So to say that had ICC been there during the colonial times is to miss the point again, because we know that even today people are going to court and they are getting verdicts in the UK against the British government around Mau time and around colonial action. So it's possible to get justice.
Linda, just one moment. Just one
I am
question.
running out of time.
No, I understand. Okay. I know you are pressed for time.
Director, 1 or 2 more minutes?
One of the things that Martin has completely failed to address in all this debate is why other countries have refused to join. Big democracies, bigger than even Kenya itself.
That's their choice.
Why China has refused? Why India has refused?
Okay.
Why the US has refused?
Okay.
Why has Professor Mamdani called ICC International Colonial Court?
Mr. Chepkonga, we have to wrap this up, but thank you so much for joining us on KTN Prime. Samuel Chepkonga, Justice and Legal Affairs Committee Chairman, National Assembly, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Martin Law, political analyst, thank you for joining us. Thank you for watching this discussion on the formation of the African Court. Let's see how sustainable this is.